Okay, so we got to start with this. Unranked Purdue knocks off number 2 Iowa 24-7 on the road. Of all the upsets that could have upset today, this was the one everybody was like, I don't think so. I don't think Purdue's very good. And then on Sunday, well, Iowa will be ranked the nation's number 1 corn producer, but they won't be the number 2 team in the country. This Iowa loss means only Michigan or Michigan State could finish as the undefeated Big Ten champ. They play the week after next, and neither of them have played Ohio State yet. B1G is getting to see how the SEC lives. Now, good RJ thought Purdue's got a stud in wide receiver David Bell. Evil RJ says, see what happens when Iowa can't turn the ball over and plays against a starting quarterback? Now, allow me to unpack both RJs. The Boilermaker defense forced 4 turnovers in this game, including 4 interceptions, and made life awful for Spencer Petras, who was sacked 4 times too. I should say that's 5 turnovers, not 4 interceptions. David Bell was out here on his Anita Ward. If you don't know, don't go look it up. If you do, you with the right crew. He got 11 passes for 240 yards receiving. Matt Hankins is Iowa's best DB, not named Riley Moss. And Bell was just ringing him, cooking him out supreme. Look, his primary quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, completed 30 of 40 passes for 374 yards with 2 TDs. Also, the touchback rule is absolutely monumentally stupid. Purdue ought to have whooped Iowa by 7 more points than they did. And there's this from, well, us. These are the most all-time wins against AP top 2 teams entering today, with a list of teams, that include Notre Dame, who has 17 wins against AP number 2 teams. Ohio State, who has 16. USC, who has 16. Oklahoma, who has 14. And Purdue, who has 13. One of these is not like the others. Look, that's 4 Blue Bloods and Purdue. That's 4 national title winning programs and Purdue. That's 4 of the most profitable and revered programs in the sport and Purdue. It gets better. Purdue hadn't beat a ranked team on the road, I should say a ranked top 10 team on the road, since October 18th, 2003. That was when they were at Wisconsin. But wait, there's more. Purdue's last top 10 road win against a number 2 team, check it, Notre Dame, September 28th, 1974. 47 years ago. AP number 12 Oklahoma State knocks off, defeated number 25 Texas 32-24. I almost said Texas was undefeated. That ain't true. On the road. Now, there's a cheap joke in there about Cowboys, Bulldog, and Longhorns, but we prefer our jokes here seasoned, marinated, grilled over an open flame for flavor, Otherwise, Oklahoma State has beaten 3 ranked opponents in a row. No one else in the country has done that. I believe that's the first time in school history Oklahoma State has done that. And Oklahoma State's blind resume is as good as any team in the country not named Georgia. And we'll talk about Georgia a little bit later in the day, but what you need to know is they're the number 1 team in the country. Oklahoma State is 6-0. Pay the Pokes their respect. The Longhorns trotted onto the 40 acres, averaging 44.5 points per game, the 5th best in the FBS and the most the Longhorns had averaged per game through the first half of the season since 2008. The Pokes held the Longhorns to just 24 points. And last week, Casey Thompson became the first Longhorn QB ever to throw for at least 300 yards and 0 interceptions against an Oklahoma team that, we expect to be in the Big 12 championship game. He's also the first Texas QB in Big 12 history to toss a 300-yard passing game with 5 passing touchdowns. That means he did something neither Vince Young nor Colt McCoy did in Texas when they played, and both of those guys played in a national title game. The Pokes held Thompson to 15 of 27 for 179 with just 1 TD and 2 INTs. Look, Oklahoma State overcame a double-digit deficit to win. The Pokes trailed Boise State 20-7. They did this for the second time and came back to win that game 21-20 last month. Look, the Pokes scored 19 unanswered after trailing Texas by double digits. And in the second half, this is how they did it. Oklahoma State's defense forced 4 straight 3-and-outs, turned Texas over on downs, and then snatched an interception to seal the victory. Meanwhile, the offense scored on 4 out of 5 possessions in the second half to, again, secure that victory. So Texas has blown double-digit leads for the second time in as many weeks, and it's going to be the difference between literally being a top 10 darling and Big 12 favorite to being unranked and 4-3. That's just brutal. I need to add here, Texas was 8-3 last year with Tom Herman as head coach, and Steve Sarkisian's already at his 3rd loss of the season, 7 games in. Yeesh. But there was an upside for Texas. There was the appearance of the number 1 2023 recruit in the country. His first name is Arch. His last name is Manning. Look, I would have said before the season began that Arch Manning was a shoo-in to be the starting quarterback at Clemson in 2 years' time. Not so after this year, but you want Texas, or you wanted, if you were Texas, to put on a display for this man on a huge recruiting weekend, and you could not come through. Your guess for where Arch Manning plays his college football is as good as my guess, and it looks as if there are lots of folks that still have some things to say about that, especially with some moving and shaking going on at one Oklahoma at quarterback at present. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for me, this game was supposed to be a BIJAN Robinson Heisman Trophy case strengthening moment, right? He rushed for 135 yards and caught 3 passes for 38 with 3 touchdowns in this game. But he can't win a Heisman on a 3-loss team. The last player to win the Heisman who didn't play in the playoff for the national title game was Lamar Jackson, who also played on a 4-loss team, 9-4. But that season, that man had 4,928 yards of offense. 1,538 of those yards were rushing in his Heisman Trophy winning season. He rushed for 21 TDs too that year. This is what Bijan is up against. We already veer toward the quarterback because they're a more important position. What I'm saying is Bijan's going to have to rush for 2,000 yards and then some just to get, I believe, to the Heisman finalist stage, to the Heisman ceremony, because there are legitimately 12 teams that can claim they have a Heisman favorite because no one has separated in a meaningful way in this pageant contest. All right. Georgia beat the brakes off of number 11 Kentucky, 30-13. Kentucky falls to 6-1. Georgia moves to 7-0. UGA has whooped UK for the last 12 times in a row by an average margin of 18 points per game. UGA was favored by more than 23 in this game, and though UK covered, think about that for just a second. Both teams were 6-0. The last time I saw 2 undefeated teams with this kind of spread, it was UGA favored by 17 plus against Arkansas this year. We know how that went. UGA's win streak against UK is the longest against a single opponent over the last 40 years. The other, Vanderbilt, who the Dogs beat every year from 1995 to 2005. And in this season of dog defensive dominance, Georgia has leaned heavily on the overall talent of its defense, enjoying the use of what first I heard from Baylor head coach Dave Aranda called simulated pressures. In his week 7 availability, Kirby Smart gave an explanation for what simulated pressure is at Georgia and how it has helped the dog defense this season.
Well, I mean, there's several games they've gotten a lot of pressure. We haven't pressured a lot this year at all, but we really didn't pressure a lot last year. We've gone away from, there's a lot more move in NFL football with offenses. Offenses have gotten more complicated. They're different. A lot of simulated pressures. So it means you bring somebody and drop somebody, which some people would call a fire zone, but we call them simulated pressures because it's usually only 4 guys rushing, sometimes 3 guys rushing, and they allow you to play simpler coverages where you don't have to get really complicated and worry about a bust. And the front has helped us do that, but we've changed a little bit philosophically. Whether we got a great front seven, an average front seven, or a poor front seven, we'd probably be doing what we're doing. So it's not a matter of them changing us. It's more what we have to do to defend these type offenses.
So one of the reasons that I love to hear coaches talk ball is you get to see a little bit of what they got going on there. And what Kirby basically told us is that we're not sending more than 4. We're not telling you where those 4 are coming from. But one of the reasons that he can do that is because of big 99 in the middle. And it bears repeating. I wrote this on the Fox Sports app in my college football tiers column, and we touched on it a little bit earlier this week. But the UGA defense is playing better than any offense in the country. And the best player on that unit is Jordan Davis. I don't see why Davis winning the Heisman isn't an obvious choice. Just because a player plays defense doesn't mean he can't be the best player in the country. This convention that QBs, wide receivers, and running backs are the best players in the sport needs to be aired out. Having the ball doesn't make you the best player in the sport, even if it makes you the most important one. But if you can't move it or score it, attention needs to be paid as to why. And consistently, Davis and the Bulldogs defense have shown that no one can move the ball or score with anything approaching regularity, in large part because of the 6'6", 340-pound immovable object up front. As for the argument about Davis's stats, this is why watching football is important. If a stat sheet made a player the best, Mike Leach would have had an argument for the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback for the last 20 years. Watch UGA's defense and you'll see it's a bow and arrow, and Davis is the hand that fires it. The Dogs have Florida in the world's largest outdoor cocktail party next week, but the big question remains, can they beat Bama? Hopefully, we get to find out end of the season.
That's incredible.
Hey kinfolk, I appreciate you for watching. Subscribe here and ring the bell so you don't miss the latest upload to the channel. Also, be sure to watch more videos here, like FS1 Studio shows and the best from Fox Sports and Fox Sports Digital.